Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. If this is your first time listening, well, thanks for coming. The Hollywood in Toto podcast airs every Friday with engaging interviews, the latest headlines, and recommendations to make the most of your leisure time. As always, you can find the show notes at hollywoodintoto.com. This week we're talking with filmmaker John Sullivan. He co-directed the 2012 smash 2016 Obama's America, as well as its follow-up, America, Imagine the World Without Her. Before we get to John, though, I want to talk about that new Spider-Man Homecoming trailer. I guess my first reaction is so far so good. It's a continuation of the themes we saw in Captain America Civil War. You've got the young Spider-Man who wants to be a superhero, but of course there are certain forces at play saying, hey, take it easy, this is not an easy business. You better learn slowly and kind of move cautiously before you start fighting the bad guys. And of course, that voice is played by Robert Downey Jr., revisiting his Tony Stark character. The bigger issue here to me is, are we really hungry for a third Spider-Man franchise? Of course, Tobey Maguire did it very well the first time around, if you'll excuse Spider-Man 3. Andrew Garfield was a capable Spider-Man, but then, of course, that only lasted 2 feature films, and the second one really didn't have a lot of enthusiasm behind it. Now we've got Tom Holland, the third Spider-Man in the franchise. Certainly looked like he could do the job in Captain America Civil War. We'll have to see if he can carry an actual film this time around. But to me, the big question is, if it does succeed, if the ticket sales are through the roof, if people are clamoring for Spider-Man again, then I think every failed comic book franchise is fair game. I think we'll see a Green Lantern reboot, even though that's DC Comics and not Marvel. I might even consider a Catwoman feature. I think all is forgiven. Let's bring back Halle Berry or someone who's younger and hungrier. Maybe that's another way to kind of spin things around. Everything superhero related seems to click. I'm a little skeptical about Spider-Man, though. I think there's a little bit of burnout potentially here, but we shall see. Coming next year, next summertime, Tom Holland, Spider-Man Homecoming. Also want to talk about Rogue One, a Star Wars story, coming this mid-December. Right now, ticket sales are strong. I'm not surprised by that. I don't know if it's going to actually match Episode 7, The Force Awakens, but you know what? It doesn't have to. If it gets pretty darn close to it, I think that's good enough. But one of the interesting storylines around this is the politicalization of this particular film. Now, this isn't a political film on its surface. This is Star Wars. It's good versus evil. This is the Death Star. All the things we've kind of fallen in love with over the years. But there are elements in our culture that won't let it be that easy. We're told that the Trump supporters and or the alt-right, who are often combined in media circles, well, they're waging a war against this movie. Why? Well, it's not 100% clear, but there's talk about the diversity of the film's cast. That's an issue. Of course, I think that's a bunch of nonsense, but we'll see how other people think about it. But also about the effort to make this a Trump resistance project in addition to a franchise extender for Star Wars. Now, Chris Weitz, one of the screenwriters behind the film, recently tweeted out a safety pin meme that, of course, has been connected to the Trump resistance on the left. Now, he did it once. I don't think he did it again, and I suspect that the Disney executives probably rang him up and said, hey, Chris, love your work here, but boy, you got to calm this down because this is not going to be made into another Ghostbusters. We've got a lot of money at stake here, and if we make this into a culture war item, that doesn't serve anyone well. I think the box office would suffer as a result, and I don't think anybody really wants that. So I think that effort has been basically calmed down, whether by someone's kind of cooler heads prevailing or maybe Disney executives kind of gently putting their foot down. But the other effort is the media, of course. You see a couple of tweets from a couple of yahoos saying, oh, this is so anti-Trump, or I don't like that diverse cast. You know, let's not overanalyze that. Let's not magnify those voices. There's always a yahoo or two on social media. That doesn't matter. We shouldn't let that kind of conquer the media narrative. Just put it in perspective. Let's just enjoy the movie, hope it's as good as the other films, better than the prequels, and we'll move on from there. Finally, I want a quick recommendation for listeners. My HiT tip of the week. It's called Don't Think Twice. It's now available on Blu-ray and video-on-demand services. This is Mike Birbiglia, the stand-up comic. It's his second feature film, so he's not just in front of the camera, but he wrote and directed as well. This time around, it's about an improv group. They don't really make a lot of money. They don't put the fannies in those seats, but you know what? They love what they do. They follow their muse, and it's their creativity and passion which rules the day. But of course, there's always the temptation of that Saturday Night Live-esque show, lurking in the distance, looking for comedy players just like them, and maybe they could be the next superstars in that show. But you know what? Will they sell their souls to get there? And will they rat each other out and turn on each other when one of the players is plucked from that obscurity to be on that particular show? Now, this is a comedy that does have its laughs, but it has a lot of awkward moments as well, and that's to the film's credit, because I think a comedy like this and dealing with comedians, it's not always fun and games. So I think in the darker moments is where the film really kind of hits its stride. I think Mike Birbiglia is a comic to watch, a talent to watch. I'm looking forward to seeing what else he does. Now, this movie didn't make a ton of money. I think by independent film standards, it was a modest hit, but I really do hope people check it out because it is a good film. I always love to support independent cinema when it's done right, and I think this is a good example of it. Don't think twice. Mike Birbiglia and Company, solid film. Check it out this weekend. All right, well, let's go to the interview of the week. This is John Sullivan. He's a driving force behind some of the biggest conservative documentaries of our time. Think Expelled with Ben Stein, 2016 Obama's America with Dinesh D'Souza. That's just for starters. Plus, he's an executive producer on the upcoming Gosnell feature film. That's the film that crashed all those crowdfunding records a few months ago. Of course, it's not out yet. It's coming soon. But, of course, the story of the serial killer, Kermit Gosnell, the doctor who was performing abortions in ghastly ways. It could be a very powerful film. We'll have to see when it comes out next year. Of course, John Sullivan is one of the key people behind it. Now, he did not start his career making movies. I wasn't aware of this before we talked with him, but wanted to check in with him about the upcoming film, about his career, and also his thoughts about the disconnect between Hollywood and the public in general. Here's my interview with John Sullivan.
I mean, I look like Jim Gaffigan or Philip Seymour Hoffman is the last person you'd expect to be promoting, like, hip-hop shows. So I started promoting bands like the Beastie Boys, Sir Mix-a-Lot, and kind of just moved on from that into kind of larger venues to eventually like 10,000 and 20,000 seat amphitheaters. And I did all of that for about 12 years. So really kind of from the age of 15 to 27, that was pretty much my full-time job, was working in the music business.
And now from there, was there something that compelled you to switch gears? I mean, you were being successful. You were kind of doing the dream in a sense.
Yeah, it was actually. And strangely enough, I kind of left right at like a point where my boss had been promoted to like the president of Worldwide Music for Pace Concerts and, or not world, at that time it was national. Eventually Pace became Live Nation. A lot of my friends from there still work over at Live Nation. But yeah, it was kind of a weird switch. And what kind of got me was we did an online broadcast, one of the first online broadcasts of a concert. It was the Warped Tour, I think maybe the second year of the Warped Tour. We kind of did our own kind of guerrilla version. I remember I got really in trouble with CAA over this, but to the point where I almost got fired. But we kind of guerrillaed putting together like an online, streaming all the concerts, and it had been done, I think, one other time prior to that. And I remember there's even like an old MTV special on the Warped Tour, and they kind of highlight us doing that. And that to me demonstrated, I couldn't have foreseen YouTube exactly, but, a precursor or something to YouTube. And that kind of made me switch gears over to film. And when I left, I went back to film school, actually, and went to San Francisco State more for digital media, but it kind of incorporated a lot of video. And actually, they didn't do film; they just did all video and digital. And that was kind of like what I did after concerts, and started doing more editing and film making type things, commercials from there. So that was kind of the transition.
Well, during your music days, the fact that you were kind of personally a right-of-center soul, did that influence anything? Did it come up at all, or was it just the music and the art and no one really cared where you kind of pulled the lever on election day?
Yeah, nobody really kind of cared. It was really truly sex, drugs, rock and roll, so you kind of had that mentality. And again, people are really insulated, and I guess it mattered to bands as you got to know them, but for a lot of us at the larger venue style, we were doing 40 to 60 shows a year. So every other night during the summers, we had, we'd have Janet Jackson one night, and then, Lollapalooza the next night. And the next night after that is Barry Manilow. Then you have Ted Nugent. Then you have Def Leppard. So, it was kind of like you didn't get to know these people, if you will. Some of them you did. I mean, like Ted came through. Nugent came through several times. He would hold these bow and arrow clinics where we'd have to set up hay bales and everything and provide a space for them to do this bow hunters whole thing. But again, I would say I personally got to know a lot of these acts. It wasn't like we were best friends vacationing together or anything like that. No, there were different acts that you were helping develop. And then so you'd see them come through 3, 4, 5 times, and you may get to develop them more. But I would say it was more on the agent side and the promoter side, where you had those relationships. And to be honest, they're all capitalists. They're all trying to make money. So at some core level, they're right of center. They may not be socially right of center, but they were on the business side. They were right of center, and so there was kind of an alignment there. It was all about making money and how did you do that. So and it's weird. I mean, like, the people in our office, we had politics, political talks, and it's kind of always like a mixed bag and of people, and you get people that were very, very right of center. And one guy was super right of center in our office. We had other people that were much more left, and you had mixed people. And we had one of the executives was gay, but very pro business and that side of it. So again, it was kind of a mixed bag, and I don't know, politics didn't come up so much, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it sounds kind of healthy, honestly.
It was. No, and partly I think it's because you know people, right? You know people in the office, and so they know where you stand, and you know where they stand. There may be situations where you can talk about something. There may be other things you can get an argument. I will say it was a very combative atmosphere, just in general. I mean, people yelled and screamed. If you ever remember the show Swimming with the Sharks with Kevin Spacey, the movie, that was kind of a lot of the executives and agents and stuff. It was a very much a hostile workplace. Like, it was a triggered workspace, if you will. So you had to be a very tough individual to survive that. So having a political blowout was nothing new, because you were having a blowout over something else. Like, the fact that we had, Coca-Cola was sponsoring something, or, Budweiser was sponsoring something, but our sponsor for our series was Miller. So there was a big blowout between us and the artists. So, it was combative, hostile work environment from a lot of perspectives. I mean, I remember one executive who threw fax machines almost on a weekly basis when things didn't go their way. So, it was a very different environment. I mean, it was an environment where politics, something like that wouldn't have bothered anybody.
Gotcha. Well, let's kind of flash forward a little bit to now, between the shift to film school and wanting to work more digital, that kind of between there and 2016 Obama's America, was it a long time or short? I mean, you're a young man. It didn't sound like you shifted gears pretty easily at that point.
Yeah, I think having the background in the concert experience, particularly events, I mean, you have to look at, like, from the age of, basically 15, I started putting on events for hundreds of people and then to thousands of people and 20,000s. I mean, we did raves, we did festivals, we did everything. So from an event management logistics standpoint, that translated extremely well into producing, just logistically in line producing. So, putting up catering, understanding catering budgets, the logistics and security and, all the things that have to go along with that. And also a big part of my job was actually marketing. When I was as a promoter, so I did a lot of the creative and advertising development and a lot of the buying related to print, TV. We had another radio buyer, but I did some of that too and worked on the promotions. So it was a very rounded. I'm very thankful for the experience I had and that environment. So that translated all over really, really well. The parts that I would say I had to go learn were more the filmmaking and editing parts of that. So, I started actually as an editor, kind of more volunteering as an editor, like at a church and for nonprofit stuff. And I did some commercials, and then I worked for I did a lot of, like, brand management for, it's now Verizon, but it was SBC, and a friend who was working that, so we would do a lot of chroma keying and stuff like that. So I was learning more on the technical side, and actually went to school more for special effects. It's kind of what I focused on. And I really hated it. I hated special effects once I kind of figured out what it was I was going to have to be doing, which was sitting in front of a computer for, 10 hours a day. I worked for a little bit in locations. I had a friend who was a locations manager in San Francisco. We were living in the suburbs of that, so I helped him with some commercials. Found out I didn't like doing